Another title for this could be How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love My Hot Glue Gun. I wanted to do something kind of chill and just hanging out this week because at the time I'm filming this, I am very frantically packing for a cross-country move. It's not my cross-country move, it is my girlfriend's. Yes, we're having a great American homosexual road trip. So I've been scrambling to get everything done, to be out of town for a while, and that means that what I've really been doing is spending a lot of time playing Animal Crossing. It is literally the last thing I do before I fall asleep at night, and then the first thing that I do when I wake up in the morning. It's a lot better than scrolling Twitter. So with everyone kind of getting back on the Animal Crossing train, I wanted to tell you a story about the time that I did a 1-week speed build of an Animal Crossing ball gown. And just kind of hang out and talk about Animal Crossing because that's my favorite thing to do. So I started playing Animal Crossing in 2013. The first game I played was Animal Crossing New Leaf. I graduated college in 2013 and I knew that that was going to be a rough couple of years for me heading into it, and gosh, it sure was. So I think that is a big part of why I loved Animal Crossing so much, is because it was very gentle, it was very soothing. It was the kind of thing that I could do on my very long train commute. I felt very disordered and uncertain of what I was doing in my life, but in Animal Crossing, it's like, oh, I'm just getting the fossils. Sometimes people nag on Animal Crossing as being like a chore simulator, and I'm like, I like chores. I don't know. I like the feeling of accomplishing something in a very gentle and a very calm environment. My New Leaf save file was about 900 hours. I played this game a lot. The wild thing about this is my town was never like a beautiful Tumblr aesthetic town. It was always kind of a mess. I was honestly just a completionist. I wanted to complete my museum, which I did. I should say I never time traveled. I have no judgment for people that do time travel, but it's just not for me. So I would like, if I missed a critter in November or something, I would be like, oh, bummer, guess I'm not gonna complete my Critterpedia until May of next year. So Animal Crossing was just really there for me in a very kind of weird transition, figuring out adulthood time in my life. I didn't cosplay from Animal Crossing for the longest time because most of the cosplays I saw people doing were of the NPCs, you know? Like in 2015 and 2016, I made a lot of cosplays where I was just trying to do what I saw other cosplayers doing, and it made me really miserable because I was just so in my head comparing myself. I've been cosplaying since 2009, and I really feel like it took me until kind of 2017 to really get a sense that it is okay to love what I love doing, and it is okay to focus on that. 2017 was also the year that Animal Crossing Pocket Camp came out. And I kind of started to think about the fact that, ooh, maybe it is time to come up with an Animal Crossing original design. Maybe there is something I can make that takes my big love of Animal Crossing and interprets it into like an outfit. When I started to think about what kind of Animal Crossing cosplay I could make, I asked myself, you know, what is the thing that is the most important about Animal Crossing? Or what is the thing that I love the most about Animal Crossing? The NPCs are cute, but like, I don't live and die for the NPCs. The villagers are great. I love Julian. I bought his amiibo card in the pandemic. But like, I don't, you know, wake up every morning and think about Julian when I'm turning on my 3DS. And I just kind of realized that for me as a completionist, as someone who has a very ugly village, the thing that I love the most and that means the most to me is my inventory, or my little pockets full of, you know, fossils and the little leaves that represent the furniture, and just kind of like, that's the game, you know, is saying, oh, what do I have in my pockets? Once I realized that, then I started thinking, how could I turn my inventory into an outfit? You know what I think it was? Someone had made, whoa, this is like a brain blast that I just remembered this. You know what I think it was? Someone had made a ball gown out of Zoom Zooms. Do you remember those little like hot dog shaped Disney stuffed animals? They had built a big old hoop skirt with all of them on it. And I just kind of liked the way that looked. I thought it looked really neat. I thought it was a fun way of being like, oh, I love Zoom Zooms. I turned them into a ball gown. I think that is the idea that I was pulling from, because I was like, the little icons, you know, in your Animal Crossing inventory, those are also things that I could make out of whatever materials, and I could just pop on a ball gown skirt and have something that looked really visually impressive, and that also you looked at and were like, oh, that's Animal Crossing. Like, I know what those are. I know those are bells. I know those are fossils. We got it. It is a form of drag to me, you know, when I become the like very soft femme Disney princess person in cosplay, because that's just wicked not who I am out of it. So that was the idea, you know, to make an inventory Disney princess. I started sketching this in early December of 2017 because I knew I was going to be going to MAGfest, which is one of my favorite conventions. It is always the first weekend of the year, so it was the first weekend of 2018. Every time I go to MAGfest, I end up with like 5 different legendary stories of just kind of like nerds being chaotic and wonderful and magical. It is always the convention that reminds me why I love conventions. MAGfest stands for Music and Gaming Fest, so there are a lot of gamers there. They have a really wonderful arcade. I knew that it would be a place where I could roll up in a kind of weird Nintendo cosplay and people would be like, oh yeah, I know what this is. So starting this process, I honestly just made a list of things that go in your Animal Crossing inventory, and specifically things that I liked the look of that I wanted to incorporate in a design. I knew I wanted bell bags and bells themselves. I knew I wanted fossils because honestly, the fossils were what got me into the game. Completing the museum was one of the first things that I did. It was my priority. I woke up every single day and was like, gotta get these fossils. I knew I wanted the leaves, you know, to represent all the different furniture, and I was already looking forward to making a lot of jokes about being like, wow, I've got a full Rococo set here. Can you even believe it? Yes, that is the mermaid set, actually. I knew I wanted the presents because the white box with the little red ribbon is so iconic. I keep saying iconic, and it's actually funny because it's like, I'm talking about icons, so you know, great job Animal Crossing dev team. You did what you set out to do. You made your icons iconic. I wanted pitfall seeds also because God, I just hate those motherfuckers. Oh, I wanted a little Lloyd because I just love the little guys with the little flappy arms. I cannot get off topic and start talking about New Horizons and all of the things that happened in this update. This is not a joke. I did actually cry when I watched the direct because I was just like, oh my God, they put everything that I loved in New Leaf into New Horizons. This is so stupid. I'm actually getting very emotional thinking about it. Pull it together, Lizard. That's the kind of person I am, I guess. Almost tearing up about Lloyd. So those are like little bup-bup-ups, you know, but they're not kind of like full coverage fabrics, right? Like we still are going to need to have some kind of base. And I thought it would be a really nice way to bring in the vibes of New Leaf to have my inspirations for the base fabric be the sky and the ground, because that's, you know, what you see when you're running around your village. December, you know how Decembers are. You think you've got all this time and the next thing you know, you're like, oh my gosh, it is a holiday and I have none presents. So that's basically what happened this year, same as literally every year, and God, probably this year too. I definitely meant to get started on this cosplay in December, and that just didn't happen. For the things that I've already said about the fact that this was kind of like a point as a cosplayer where I was relearning to like trust my instincts and just dive into the things that I really liked making, I decided that it would be a fun challenge to give myself to make this a speed build. The reason why I decided this, besides the fact that, you know, it was December and I hadn't started on anything, so I had to make it a speed build, but it was really the fact that as a creator, as a craftsperson, I can get really in my head and really like genuinely anxious around the kind of internal finishing of costumes. Because I started cosplaying in 2009, like I was not a BB cosplayer, so I would get it in my head that I was like, my costumes need to be at a certain level, my costumes need to be always, you know, exponentially improving. And it made me really miserable. And the thing about only giving yourself a week to make a finished ball gown is that you can't be precious about internal finishing. I couldn't cry over French seams, you know? I couldn't try and use techniques that were way too ambitious for a project. So let me break down this timeline real quick. So I came back from holidays with my family on, I think, Thursday. I'm gonna need to actually look up some photos and make sure that I'm corroborating my story. Let's go in our little time machine, go on a trip, our favorite rocket ship. So I came back in town the night of the 28th, which was a Thursday. So Friday morning was the shopping trip. The con was the next Thursday. So I woke up bright and early in like honestly one of the coldest days of the year and headed down to the garment district to do some shopping for some fabrics that I didn't totally know what they were gonna be, but I knew I wanted them to like evoke the sky and the ground. I ended up finding, hilariously, comedically, a really beautiful 100% silk charmeuse gradient that went from like a really beautiful sky blue to this really deep, like Crayola blue, like the color that my hair currently is blue. It was not cheap and it was charmeuse, but I was like, these are the colors, this is what I need. So I bought it and a lot of iron-on interfacing, and I was like, I will just do a crime. I will just ruin this beautiful soft fabric and make it something very sturdy that I will hot glue things to. The fabric that ended up having the best kind of like green, light green kind of patchiness to have the same vibe as the grass in New Leaf, which, by the way, bane of my existence also. Like, I did so much. I did everything the guide said and I still had patchy grass in New Leaf. Thank God New Horizons got rid of that, because that was like, I hated it. That fabric ended up being a chiffon actually, which I was like, okay, great. So we had a chiffon and a charmeuse. I was working with nightmare fabric for a speed build, which doesn't make any sense. But when you're prioritizing color and like pattern, I guess, it's what happens. I got some bright red ribbon. I stopped by Michael's and picked up like some little discs and some Model Magic just to make it work. So at this point, you know, it's the Friday, the weekend before the con is happening, and I'm like, oh my God. Did I make a terrible mistake? I remember that feeling of like, I've got my materials, I'm ready to go, and being like, this might not happen, but we're gonna try. I'm a big believer in the fact that when you're making something, it's actually really important to like schedule in working on things that are maybe not as technically important or like necessary, but that will make you feel really excited and motivated because you like how it turned out. This is why I started with sculpting a little bitty Lloyd out of Model Magic. It was so not at all the most important thing to do first, but it made me feel like, look, he's here. There's a little gyroid drying in front of my mini Christmas tree. Then I started working on drafting the bodice. I think I started with a truly Victorian pattern I had lying around. I messed up this pattern so many times. I ended up having to like redraft it entirely. This was a speed build and I did not have time to be precious about materials. The bodice I made out of 2 layers of muslin fabric with the chiffon just kind of like overlaid on top of it. I just basted it down along the edges of the fabric and I was like, that's fine, it's a bodice now. Looking back on the pattern, I'm like, what was I thinking? Of course that wasn't gonna work for the front of the bodice. Of course I had to add a whole other piece in there. So that was Saturday, was just getting the bodice fabric cut and started. Sunday, I started working on the skirt. Yeah, man, I really just fucked up that silk charm. It was beautiful fabric and I double interfaced it with like the crappiest polyester fabric. I knew I was going to be putting a lot of stuff on this skirt, so I needed it to support the weight of everything, and charmeuse was not going to get the job done, so we did some crimes and it all worked out. If you haven't watched the very first video on my channel yet, I talk a lot about how much I do interfacing crimes, and this is probably one of my worst. But you know, after all of that crime, the gradient of the skirt looked beautiful. So again, with the importance of kind of mixing like things that are important and do need to get done to have a wearable outfit with doing very cute and very motivating things that make me feel like I feel God in this Chili's tonight, but it's I feel Animal Crossing in my apartment, that crunch. I also made some little pitfall seeds out of little wooden discs that I got at Michael's. I just made a quick stencil and I acryliced on some, you know, red exclamation marks. I cleaned them up with red Sharpie because I think the acrylic was a little messy looking. Wait, I forgot to mention that also this is fully New Year's Eve. This is what I am doing New Year's Eve 2017 into 2018, is I was painting pitfall seeds and committing charmeuse atrocities. The next day, New Year's Day, I had off of work, luckily. I put the waistband in the skirt, so this way it was functional, it was a skirt I could wear, it was a very exciting time. I also made the corrections to the very messed up bodice pattern. I don't even know how it happened, but in the pattern for that bodice, somehow there was like a weird little triangle here that shouldn't have been there. And you know, since I only had a week, I did not have time to fully redraft and recut everything. I just put in a little triangle insert. It looked really weird, but I also knew that I was going to be covering everything with embellishment. My 2016 self would have stressed out about it and would have freaked out thinking that like my craftsmanship isn't good enough, I'm not a good enough cosplayer, and my 2017 self was like, we don't have time to worry about that. We have bad decisions to make. So by Monday night, end of New Year's Day, we had like a quasi-functional bodice and skirt with zippers inserted and everything. I realized that I was not going to be able to make the bells that I had sketched to have on the skirt, so I made a plan that Tuesday after work, I would go to the garment district and pray. It is a profound privilege to be a cosplayer living in New York City, because a lot of the time I can think of something really specific and say, I'm sure some store has it, and they do. So this time I put all of my trust in Pacific Trimming, which is still one of my favorite places. I said, you know, they've got a lot of buttons, they might have a bell-shaped button, and they did. I really did almost lose it when I walked in there and was like, this is a gamble, there's a lot riding on this, and then I found a button that had the like button, smaller outline, and then a little perfect star. I was like, the universe works in mysterious ways, and those mysterious ways support my questionable decisions to try and make an Animal Crossing ball gown in a week. Wednesday was the day for sleeves. The sleeves were going to be my homage to the present with the very plain white and the red little bow. So I designed them with just 4, you know, stripes down them. I made a little bow to pop on top. I also love the way they look like little shells before I attached them. I made them in a night, but they turned out really clean and really cute. Thursday, the day that I should have been leaving, mixed blessing, there was a massive snowstorm. So I had a snow day from work, which was fantastic. My bus also got canceled. So instead of leaving Thursday night for the con, I found out I was going to be leaving Friday morning at like 5 a.m. So I was like, oh great, more time to crunch. Thursday morning, I get up, I enjoy all of the freshly falling snow around me. I can like hear the little tinkly glockenspiels for the snow music in my head. I made what's maybe my favorite detail on the cosplay, and that's probably just because it's one of my favorite parts of Animal Crossing, which is the fossils. I sculpted out the little swirl and the star and the little dot out of Sculpey that I baked in my oven. I didn't paint it, it's just white Sculpey. Once those were baked, I pressed them into a Model Magic, and the Model Magic I then painted a navy. Those I hot glued onto a headband, and I had my little headband. Thursday, I also cut out all of the furniture pieces for the bodice. I made a stencil, and I grabbed an X-Acto knife, and I just kind of cut them all out of, you know, Michael's green craft foam. I did a really quick acrylic paint job on them. It's not a great paint job. I'm not a super fantastic cosplay painter, and I certainly was not at the time I made these. The timestamps on some of these photos, as I try and remind myself what I did when, are like genuinely horrifying. Like the pictures of the finished bodice and skirt before I have any of the embellishments on it, the timestamp on them is 3:30 in the morning. And it looks really cute, you know? The blue of the skirt does look like the blue of the sky, and the green of the bodice does kind of look like the green of the trampled grass. But if you thought 3:30 is bad, get ready for 4:30, which is when I was making all of those bell bags. At this point, I'm just trying to make it to my megabus on time, so I really quick made those little burlap sacks. I painted on the stars. I think they were like barely dry by the time I threw them in the bag. I'm positive I didn't sleep. Like, I don't totally remember if it was a true all-nighter, but it had to have been. How else would I have gotten all of this done? The last thing I did before I zipped up my suitcase and sprinted down to catch the bus was hot glue on all of the furniture pieces over the front of the bodice. I also added a few in the back just for a fun little detail. And at that point I was on the bus to catch a few Z's and make it to National Harbor. I got to the hotel room, I whipped out my glue gun, and we, you know, made it work. So in the hotel room is when I was hot gluing on all of the pitfall seeds that I had painted and all of the bell buttons I had bought from Pacific Trim onto the skirt in a kind of cascading gradient going down, which I think turned out super cute. I also stuffed the bell bags with polyfill, tied a little bow on them, and hot glued them onto the skirt. People often ask how they are supported, and it's really just that I made sure that I hot glued them on at a point on the skirt where they are sitting right on the hoop. So that bottom hoop is supporting all of the weight of them, and they're also just not that heavy because they're filled with polyfill. When I wore this, I also put on a little tree necklace that I had for, you know, the town tree like you have in New Leaf. I also put a little bit of blush on my nose so that I could have the kind of villager triangle nose, like a nod to it. It was 7 days almost to the hour, from Friday afternoon starting shopping to Friday afternoon being in the finished cosplay and rolling out of my hotel room like a bat out of hell 15 minutes late to my cosplay photo shoot. It got done. I did it. I had made a ball gown through the power of loving Animal Crossing and through the power of realizing that sometimes giving yourself hard deadlines can be a way to get you out of your own head. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot the most important part. I don't need to tell you what was happening in the world around the release of Animal Crossing New Horizons, but in those first 2 weeks, I made this cosplay in Animal Crossing New Horizons. And I have codes for that I will put in the bottom below. So if you want to wear this dress in your game, you can do that. Gosh, I have a lot of packing to do, and now all I want to do is play Animal Crossing. I hope you're enjoying the New Horizons update as much as I am. I hope you enjoyed this kind of chill hang. I hope you're doing fun, cool, exciting things this week. If you're interested in a slightly deeper dive on the actual design process, I definitely recommend you check out my video about how I designed and built a cosplay based on a book series. Also really good if you want to follow along with the kind of frantic choices energy as it's happening instead of as a story 3 years after the fact. So hey, you know, it's rough out there. I don't know if I'll ever stop worrying in general at large, but at least in this case, I can learn to stop worrying and love my hot glue gun. And play some Animal Crossing. I'm gonna go do that. I will see you next week.